Good morning to those in the West and good afternoon to those in the East. It is February 25th, 2021. I am super excited today to spend the next hour with my guest. A lot of you know my guest as the former British Columbia Premier from 2011 to 2017. Miss Christy Clark led British Columbia over those 6 years. She is the longest serving female premier in Canadian history and the only female premier to actually be reelected. Over that same period, she demonstrated the strongest leadership performance as premier in not only job growth, fiscal management, but job creation, the perfect trifecta. Today, Christy is an associate member of the Interaction Council, an international organization where former heads of state collaborate and tackle to solve the problems, the global challenges facing all of us today. She's also a senior advisor to Bennett Jones and sits our chairs various boards. Christy has been recognized as one of the top 100 most powerful women in the country. She's been inducted into the Women's Executive Network Hall of Fame. One of, I think, her biggest, most gratifying things that she has done is co-founder of the Pink Shirt Day. She is a speaker, she is an advisor, a radio and television personality. Most importantly to me, she is a role model. Please welcome my friend, Miss Christy Clark. Good morning, Christy.
Good morning, Gary. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah. How have you been, Christy? It's wild. The world's really changed. I mean, March of last year, this whole thing sort of exploded and COVID-19, was sprung, and it's just been a crazy time. What have you seen?
It's been crazy. I mean, for extroverts like you and I, it's been, I think, especially hard sometimes. But, I have found that it's it's nice to have all these people on Zoom. If I'm hosting a book club and I don't have to clean up my house, I don't have to provide hors d'oeuvres or anything. So, I mean, it's been interesting. The move online has actually been, I think, really freeing for some of us. But, I know that for moms in particular, who are still doing something like 80% of the housework and the childcare, even if both partners are at home, you got a big pile of laundry on one side, you've got kids to look after on the other side, and you have to be at work. And I think that, it's the breaking down of those barriers in our day, those things that differentiate our day. Office is different from home, which is different from, socializing time. I'm not sure that that's been great for everybody. And I think the social isolation for some people, people in my family, been really, really difficult. And I see lots of friends who are struggling with mental illness and anxiety and their kids these days. It's been tough.
Yeah, and is that where where the most sort of vivid damage has been? I mean, we had Dr. Drew Pinsky on the show a while ago, and he had said that we haven't even begun to see the damage, the social isolation that it's creating. I know right here in British Columbia, we talked about it this morning, we are at new record levels of opiate, crisis, right? We're seeing more deaths than ever before. Is that where you would think we've seen the most damage so far, or where are you seeing it?
I'm seeing it for sure the opioid crisis. We have never had more people die of opioid overdoses in the history of British Columbia. And so, you certainly see that amongst the homeless population, but, the majority of people who die of opioids do so in their own home or do it in a private dwelling. I think we need to keep in mind that a lot of these people are just invisible. And, my father was an alcoholic. I've talked about this before. And, he was an alcoholic because he struggled with mental illness. And so that was his medication of choice, to self-medicate. And I think opioids are that for a lot of people too. So the two things I think are inextricably linked.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the beginning, Christy. Maybe share with our audience just sort of how it all begun and your journey and how you wound up in politics, and not only wound up in politics, but how you wound up as premier. We'd love to hear that story.
Well, okay, it's a long story because it started early, Gary. You have to interrupt me if you feel like.
All right.
My dad was a candidate for the BC Liberals in 1966. 1969 in a by-election, and in 1974. Lost all times. He was a teacher, president of the Riding Association, had to run because nobody else was the riding. BC Liberals couldn't win at the time. And I don't think have ever since. And he, so I was knocking on doors for him when I was a little kid in 1969. I was like 4 years old, and he'd send me up to the door, and I was like any 4-year-old. I was cute, so they wouldn't yell at him, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of grew up around politics, and my family really encouraged open debate and opinionated debate around the table, which I think is hugely important for intellectual development for kids. It doesn't have to be about politics, but I mean, there's just so many things to talk about and debate. What kind of art do you like? What kind of music are you interested in? Do you, what makes a good teacher? What makes a good horse or a dog? Whatever the discussion is that you want to have, my parents really encouraged that. So I was never afraid of debate. I was never afraid of being challenged, and I was never afraid of challenging other people, which I think was really good groundwork. And then for politics. So then I went to SFU. I didn't know anybody. I felt super alone. I was very depressed. I think lots of kids in first year go through this. And so I decided to join the Young Liberal Club, and I met my lifelong friends in that. And then went to work in politics for a little while, both here or in Victoria and in Ottawa. Came home, ran with Gordon Campbell in 1996, had a spectacular, I won in Port Moody by 462 votes. Still remember that number, but we lost the government. And you'll remember, Gary, probably everybody predicted that we would win, and Glenn Clark just squashed us. Then, the rest of my career, I think you sort of talked about that. I joined the government as a minister, had a baby, brought him to the legislature, quit, went to radio, and then came back and ran for leader of the BC Liberals and became the premier.
Yeah, I think when you actually had the baby, I think you were the first minister to actually to have a baby while sitting, correct?
I think it was the first minister. I think there was an MLA in Quebec who'd done it, but I don't think she was serving in the cabinet at the time. And, Gordon was really generous. I mean, he really did believe in the role of families in politics. I thought that was great. And he really did believe that women should be supported with their families. So, I brought my little guy to the legislature as an infant. We had a nanny there with him. And it was so great because, I could, when you're a working mother, especially when you've got a little guy, okay, so maybe he's one, right? Maybe you took a year off. It's still you still know that child needs you sometimes. So I was able to just pop across the hall and give him a snuggle for, maybe 5 minutes if I had a break between meetings. And I think it just made such a huge difference for my mental health and my sense of guilt that almost all women have, which is I'm either bad at my job or I'm bad at being a mother, and I can't be good at both. Right.
Yeah. That's well, and it's funny. I mean, let's actually drill down on that a little bit, right? That has been the biggest challenge today. It's I don't think you have to choose today from being an entrepreneur or being a mother. I think that we're starting to make, some steps on there, and you've always been incredibly proactive. And I mean, you sort of led those charges early on. I mean, when you were premier, I think if we're right, about 50% of your caucus were female, right?
The cabinet. I mean, the thing is, Gary, when you're the premier, you don't get to choose who the caucus is, because that's all it's who wins and loses, right? But you do get to choose who your cabinet is. Right. And so there was a disproportionate number of women out of the caucus who were in my cabinet because we tried to keep it about 50-50 the whole time. And the thing I kind of regret about that, Gary, is honestly, we're talking about leadership today. I decided not to make a big deal out of it because I didn't want those women who were in my cabinet to feel like they were tokens. I didn't want anybody saying I'd appointed them because they were women. I had an unbelievable cabinet, great women. Everybody who was there deserved to be there. But when I look back on it, I wish I really had trumpeted it a little bit more. I think that might have been better leadership. And then you saw Justin Trudeau make a huge deal out of it. Yeah. And, I think his leadership on that did make a difference in terms of helping change the culture a little bit. Yeah,
I think it did. And I think it's, it seems anyway, from the outside looking in that we are really starting to make some strides. I mean, there's still, huge challenges ahead of us. So just on that same vein, so what do you think are the unique challenges that women have faced in the world of policy and politics and even business.
That it's hard for us to be taken seriously. It's hard for us to be heard. I mean, it's just like, really, that's what it comes down to. People, people, men and women, are less likely to take women seriously when they say something. So they're less likely to listen to us. They're less likely to promote us. They're less likely to recognize the talents that we bring. We are less likely to make as much money. It's all about a differential level of respect in a society that is sexist. That's what it is. And, women are the victims in this, but we are also, we grow up in this sexist stew from the very beginning. I mean, from the very beginning, we learn the same lessons about women, ironically about ourselves, and absorb those that men do, which is expectations for us are lower, that we need to be liked, so you can't be tough. That relationships are not about transactions. Relationships are about how you feel about something. So women grow up in this world, and it makes us sometimes less capable until we realize, wait a minute, that's a con. That's a lie. We are just as capable and able as men. We can be tough and likable at the same time. And, if people don't like me, that's okay. I'm going to go, and we often question ourselves too. There's been tons of leadership around whether or not women have confidence in what they say. And so, you think about your own language. Look, I'm guilty of this too. I really think that, or another perspective on this is, and really that is acceptable language from women. But you don't hear men doing that nearly as often. Men will say, you know what? No, wait a second here. Here's the thing. The truth is X, Y, Z, with total confidence. But when men when men are proven to be wrong, they just move on. They just move on.
True.
So we also don't have the liberty really of kind of being able to make things up, because we believe that we're led to believe that whenever we get something wrong, we're proven to be a fraud. And so we better not get anything wrong. So we're also less likely to speak out with certainty, because, nothing's ever really certain. And those are just some of the challenges that women face all the time. And some of those barriers are things that we can change ourselves. Sheryl Sandberg says, lean in. I really, really believe in that. And that is a terrific leadership book for women, I think, as well as the one that we're going to be talking about later.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Let's just make a mention of that. Talking about books, we asked Christy what one of her favorite books was, and it was this book, The Road to Character by David Brooks there. You'll see that. So today, guys, as always, make comments, post, shares, thumbs up on social media, any social media channel. Dave's going to put up the hashtag, and we're going to pick 50 of you, and we're going to send out this book. Christy, you really, people, we just get distracted and noise gets in the way and we forget, but you really, really were, one of those individuals that early on just helped Canada become tremendously out front when it comes to the female movement and the power of female leadership and the value and the multitasking and everything you've done. If you were here today and you were speaking to someone who's got young boys and young girls, but especially young girls at home today, any tips you can give them as a mother and father team on how we can start very early on, reaching them at a level so they know they can, so that there is no doubt that imposter syndrome doesn't even begin to creep into their mind?
Yes. I think we tell girls that they can do anything that they want. And it's not true right now. Right. So I think a truer message is to say, you know what, life is harder for girls in our society. Okay. And that's something that as your mother or father, I am trying to change. And when you grow up, one of your jobs is to try and change that too. So, know that you are powerful, know that you have your own strength, and that you never have to worry about whether or not you're real or you're a fraud, because you are real and you are just as powerful as your brother or your dad growing up. And, I there's small things, right? Like we talk to our daughters and we call them princess.
Mm.
We don't call them, we don't call them queen. We don't call them, I mean, maybe queen isn't even great. But we don't call them, all of that language is laden with the, kind of the memory that women are secondary. And
so true.
I just think we really have to be honest with girls about what life is like out there, because if we tell them it's just going to be fair and you're going to get whatever you want, it is not true. And we need to make sure that they understand that, so that they can see those barriers. Because as they're growing up, if they can see those barriers, they are much more likely to try and take them down rather than try and just be co-opted and held back by them.
Christy, I think that's such a valuable comment. I've made that same mistake calling, my daughter as she was growing up princess, and, those, I think making them, sort of aware and not, we talk about words that work all the time and not pigeonholing them just with our language, thinking that we're actually protecting them. Yeah. What a great comment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Christy, I read a quote from you, and it says, have the courage to take risks, fail, find your own path, and forgive people who have done you wrong. Share your thoughts on that quote that you had put out there in the past.
Well, I mean, Gary, that's the first half of it is something well. You're an entrepreneur who built an incredibly successful business. And, failing is part of being a successful entrepreneur. And I think for men are a lot more careful, a lot more comfortable. And the research shows us this with failure, because they don't, as I said, they don't worry about being frauds. I mean, I always, whenever I give a speech to a women's group, I always say, the thing is that there's you men and women. If men get something wrong, they just make something else up. Women never want to make things up, which I guess is probably a good thing, but it does limit our ability to kind of get in there. And so I think women have to be way more comfortable with failure. But I also think that we have to forget. On the second thing, my thing about forgiveness, and this is part of, people like David Brooks with this book, Road to Character, talk about it. I think our failure to forgive people who've done us wrong holds us back.
Oh, amen.
And I think it poisons us over time inside. A sense, we sit with a sense of grievance and injustice, and that isn't healthy. Like, who cares if somebody did you wrong? Go out there and be great, and you won't care about whether or not and what they did to you. I've been through a divorce. I've been through all kinds of family issues. I've had lots of people in politics say terrible things about me. And, I'm no different from anybody else. My life hasn't been perfect, and I haven't been perfect, but I've really worked hard to just let all that crap go. And because it's just an anchor that's weighing me down. And the Buddhists talk a lot about this, really anger and hurt is just suffering that we carry with us, and it multiplies. And suffering eats us up. And I think for some people, it makes them grievously ill.
It's interesting because, and was this in your household? I mean, you've always been, as long as I've seen you via government and politics, you've always been very, very strong. I mean, it doesn't matter right or wrong, right? You weren't, trying to be the flavor or the favor of an issue on either side. I mean, you just directly went after it and were very outspoken. I think that is one of your most positive attributes. How did you build that muscle? I mean, when do you know when to charge, and when do you know when maybe not to be as aggressive?
I grew up in a lower middle class neighborhood in Burnaby, last of 4 kids. And I really kind of, when the fourth, I honestly, it's hard to do a good job, I think, raising 4 kids.
Let alone, yeah.
And, I'm not sure my parents did. They tried, but they kind of gave up by the time I came along. So I kind of had to make my own way in the world. My 2 brothers and sister were, they were pretty tough, and my neighborhood was pretty rough and ready. So I really just learned not to take any guff from people, because that was the way to survive. And it's probably not the best recipe for getting tougher, but I just sort of, and the other thing that happened to me, Gary, was when I got back into politics, I looked back at my first tenure there from 1996 to 2005, especially when I was in government, and it was so stressful, and there was so much focus on my appearance and my voice, and just so much sort of little criticism that really bugged me. I just decided if I was going to go back into politics, I was just going to be me. I wasn't going to try and be what people expected me to be. I was going to run for leader as just me. And if people didn't like that, they didn't have to elect me, and I was going to be okay with that. And I went into the 2013 election with the same, and the 2017, just like, and being premier, it was just like, that's who I am. If you don't like it, that's okay. And that's your decision. And I respect your decision, and I don't have to like you either. Right? But I don't know how you kind of do have to jettison I care a lot about what people think from people, people like you, people who I respect. But strangers I don't really know. I'm not sure why we get obsessed with wanting strangers to love us all the time. I mean, I guess it's important in politics because you need their votes, but I feel like there's a lot of young kids in today's society who are thinking about, how many Instagram followers do I have? And what are people saying about me on Facebook? And I don't think that's very healthy. Why do people care about that? Yeah,
I think it's such a great discussion. I mean, we see it over and over and over. I say to people, listen, the more you prepare yourself for breakdowns and trials and tribulations and chaos and people saying bad things about you, you just, develop this sort of layer of this shell where it doesn't matter anymore. You look at the South, you look at, the president of the United States, depending on who he is on any given year, 50% adore, love him, worship him, and 50% hate them. And if it's like in business too, I always say to people, and you said it, your friends, your inner circle, in our case, our lenders, our insurers, our brokers, our agents, those who know us know best, right? Yeah. Those who don't, who want to give negative, input to us, their thoughts doesn't matter to us. And I think it's really important. And that's a topic that we can build on. Talking about
Gary, because one of the things I used to say to my son, because he used to get chirped all the time, your stupid mother and terrible, or, blah. Like when he was a goalie in hockey, and all the other kids on the other team, that was one of the things they would do, right? To chirp him, to throw him off.
Right. Yeah.
And I used to say to him, Hamish, the thing for me is that I know that I am always trying my very best to be a good person. And I know I'm not perfect, but I know I'm always trying to, my goal in life is to be the best person that I can be. And so when people say terrible things about me, and I would say, when people say terrible things about you, it says more about them than it does about you. And I used to say that to him all the time. And then I would think, like if I'm saying that to him, and I think we all say that to our kids, I don't think we take enough of that on board ourselves.
Yeah, no question. Well, we're going to actually, in a few minutes, we're going to jump over to that whole bullying thing and how kids communicate today and the insidious damage that it's doing to our children and our society. But before we do, I want to just talk about this book. I actually haven't read this book that we're going to give away today. And coming from you, and you said it's one of your favorite books. So one of the big themes from that David's book seems to be, the book is called The Road to Character, but it seems to be is the resume virtues versus the eulogy virtues. In that resume virtues are skills for the marketplace, right? And versus the deeper items that are mentioned and you want to have mentioned in your eulogy. Can you explain that to us a little bit and why it resonates with you? And tell us the difference.
Yeah. Well, because it's about being a better person, I think. Right. I mean, honestly, people will say about you, Gary, he had a great business. He did a great job at very skilled, and and that's great. But but everybody knows that. But what I think it will be just as important to you in your obituary that people say, and he was beloved by his staff. The people that worked for him, some of them worked for him for 20, 30 years. People didn't want to leave. He was so good to people. He was so generous, such a good listener. I mean, I think those are the things we want people to say about us. And so those obituary virtues, what do you call the eulogy virtues?
Eulogy virtues,
I think are the things that really matter. Those are the things about trying to always be a really good person. Because honestly, nobody's going to say, oh boy, Gary was really good at math.
Right. Yeah.
He can do a spreadsheet like you wouldn't believe. Right.
Yeah, you know what? They did a study a couple of years ago, and I read a report, and it was talking about, and there was a book written, as well, "Who Will Cry When You Die," but it was all about that message and who you are as a person, and not your accomplishments. And they had said that they did studies, and out of the 100% of the people that actually came to your funeral service, if it was raining outside and you had to walk across to actually, see the casket layered, something like 75 or 80% said, no, it's raining too hard. I've said my piece, and won't make the effort to walk into the actual graveyard to lower the casket. Right. So, it is a really narrow focus on those people that actually care and who will cry when you die. So, I mean, that has to be the focus, obviously, on all of those relationships. We always say it's not transactional, right? It has to be so much more about personal relationships. Christy, I want to jump in here because this is an area that is just near and dear, and I got lots more to talk to you about, but let's talk about bullying today. And I think Dave was early on our board, but I was a co-founder of the I Am Someone Anti-Bullying Foundation. You were a co-founder of the Pink Shirt Day, which is incredible. Tell us how that started, and then let's talk about bullying in general, because I really want to give some takeaways to our listeners on how vile this is today, and what we can do to start improving that.
Yeah, and of course, the fact is that I think bullying's gotten worse,
right?
Because of the anonymous nature of social media and all that. The pressure on kids is just awful. And so it started because I was in radio at the time. I was at CKNW. And I started talking about bullying on the air one day. I can't remember. And a woman phoned in, and she said, I was bullied when I was a little girl, and I've never forgotten it. And it's always sat with me. And she was so, she could describe it in vivid detail. And I said, how old were you? She said, I was 4. And I said, how old are you now? She said, I'm 84.
Wow.
And it really struck me how this deep injustice of being bullied lives inside people for so long. And it's so, that bullies don't understand the damage that they've done. And then another woman called in and she said, I was a bully. I broke a little girl's clavicle once, beating her up in the schoolyard. I took another girl, and I couldn't drive. I was just a kid, but I put her in the back of the car and convinced her I was kidnapping her until she locked her in the car, and until she was so alarmed and so scared. And the woman said she'd been dealing with substance abuse and a whole bunch of other mental illness that she believed was caused by her own history being a bully. And so it got me I was so interested in the issue. And I read a story in the newspaper about these 2 kids who in Nova Scotia at high school, they saw a kid being bullied for wearing a pink shirt. And all these kids were, other kids were calling him, all the epithets
all the horrible names. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and they were really ganging up on him, and a bunch of other, there were a little clique of them. There were a whole bunch of kids were going after this kid. So these 2 boys, who I guess were kind of moderately popular, but, they weren't sort of the king and queen, the kings of the school. They came to school the next day and wore pink shirts. And they said, bully me. I'm wearing a pink shirt. And then the day after, a whole bunch more kids started wearing pink shirts. And then the day after that, a whole bunch more, until basically the whole school was standing up to the bullies who made fun of that first young man for wearing a pink shirt. And I was so moved by it. I thought, okay, we could do this in BC. So I phoned Dave, who works with you, Dave Teixeira, otherwise known as Dave.ca. Who's also been, and Dave Amazing. And Dave good taste in music, I would say also.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I said, let's do something with this. So I got permission from CKNW, and we decided to make it Pink Shirt Day. We advertised it like crazy. This was starting in January. By February, we had people offering us money, trying to giving us free pink shirts. We were printing up pink shirts. It was all totally on a shoestring. Front page of newspapers were all pink. I couldn't believe it. It was something that it was a little spark that Dave and I got going in British Columbia, and it became like a huge inferno because so many people have experienced this, and we live with it, and we can't let it go. And being involved in the anti-bullying movement, I think, gives people gets them a little bit closer to a sense of justice from what's been done to them.
Yeah, and those two young boys in Eastern Canada was David Shepard and Travis Price, and of course, that has resonated, as Christy said, throughout the country. But it was leaders like you early on that took the initiative. And Christy, to your comments there too, and we'll chat about this for a minute. But bullying today is more insidious and more vile than ever before, because today you can send as you said, anonymous messages, and you can share it online. And where when we went to school, Christy, we'd go home at 3:00 and the bullying was done. We'd go, oh my God, I got a few hours. I got to face it tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. walking to school again. But now they turn on all the electronics and it's there. So the suicide rate, the self-harm rate, has been has just skyrocketed. Some of the steps that you've learned over the years to sort of make your child aware of it would be what?
I would say, I always used to say to him, and he got bullied too. I mean, I think most people have experienced it in some form or other. That this says so much more about the other people. When I think when somebody flips you the finger in a parking lot, when somebody's yelling at an elderly lady or complaining loudly about an elderly lady taking too long in a supermarket lineup, whether it's a kid who's being bullied for, wearing the wrong clothes at school, I think that's happening because the person that is doing it has something wrong going on inside them. And, I could never convince my son to have sympathy for bullies. I think that's true for a lot of people. But ultimately, I think that's where we want to get to, is you actually want to pity them.
Yeah.
Most bullies have been bullied, probably by their own parents or siblings at home. They've learned that behavior from somewhere and they're angry and they're taking it out. But I do think also, though, too, that children should always report bullying. And adults have to, and usually this happens at school. So it's, it mostly falls to teachers and administrators, have to respond to bullying appropriately. They have to know how to protect those children and give them a sense of safety, because you can't learn if you feel unsafe.
Yeah, two comments I want to make around that too for anyone listening today. So number one, just as those two boys, Davis and Travis did, right? It is not okay to stand by or ignore, right, or not participate. This is the one time when you have to jump in and say, no. Hey, this doesn't, what? I'm not good with this. Turning a blind eye in this situation, just trying to get along with everyone. We need to teach our children that this is the one situation where they can jump in. The second thing. Sorry, Krista, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because that bystander effect is what gives bullies oxygen. With bullies don't bully. You notice bullies don't do it when there's nobody else around. Right. They do it when other people are there. And so if you have a child who sees someone being bullied, for heaven's sakes, tell them to do what Travis and David did and stand up.
The other thing I'd say that's really important too is that you as parents, right? And, both Christy and I have done a lot of this. As I said, I was really involved. I am someone is still operating today. We built the first bullying texting platform in Canada that was adopted by many provinces. The other thing is that when your kids come home or they seem off or distracted or less interested in life, or if they complain about getting bullied, like get rid of the macho bullshit where you go suck it up and it's part of life and it'll be okay and go back to school. Like so many parents grew up in that era of just like you're being a baby, get up, stand up, you got to scratch, go back to it, right? That is not the way you deal with it today. I mean, kids need to be so comforted and it's okay. And it's happened before and I've seen it and let's report it and tell me how you feel, right? We can't just say, suck it up and move on. It's going to be okay, because we have no idea as parents, certainly in our generation, the vile nature and the ability to, as I said, spread it to, tens or hundreds of thousands of people, right? So make sure you reach out, make sure that you're open, make sure that you know the services that are aware to you. There's lots of them, but to your comment, I think it's actually, with all the efforts that we've made, it's actually continues to get worse.
I think you're right. And I think for young girls, it's even harder because the pressure on them to conform in a really sexualized environment for young girls now. And so, you see so many more, girls who are getting tricked on the internet into taking their clothes off, who are getting videoed and, who are finding themselves, being shamed, in sexualized situations. And I mean, I
God.
cannot imagine what that is like for those kids. But certainly you're right, Gary, if kids are coming home, bullying doesn't build character. Bullying destroys people.
Sure does.
It's like saying war saves lives.
Right.
I mean, I think there is such a thing as a just war. I mean, in some cases, but war kills people.
Yeah. Let's thank you. What a great, interesting topic to discuss. Let's jump over. U.S. President Ronald Reagan once said, the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from government and I'm here to help." That's pretty cynical, but it does speak to a mistrust many people have in our government. How do we work to regain that mistrust? And do we have more mistrust today or less than in the past?
For Canada, I don't know the answer to that, Gary. I think that in the States, certainly there's a lot less trust. I think people have always been a little bit suspicious of government. Generally don't think government works very well. And, I think that that's true of lots of large institutions. I mean, you'll know this, right? One of the challenges of getting big is getting slow and getting a little dumb. And there really aren't organizations that are bigger than government. I mean, the government budget is, sort of in the $55 billion range just in BC. That's a pretty big organization to try and run. And it's going to do lots of dumb things that it probably shouldn't. It did it on my watch and it will do it. It's doing it on John Morgan's watch and it'll do it on his successor's watch. It's just the way it is. So I think it's wise actually to have a natural distrust of big institutions because they're sloppy and they don't do things well. Right. I also think it's important for the people who are paying for government, taxpayers, to be vigilant about where their money is going, because that money comes out of your pocket, it goes straight into government's pocket and gets recycled back into you in the form of services. Well, you want to know that those services are being, well delivered and you're getting value for your money like you would with anything that you purchase. So I think having a little distrust of government is a wise thing for most citizens. I do think, though, it gets a little bit dangerous when people start to decide that they don't want to participate in government anymore because there's no point. That's a problem. And so I think, politicians have a job to do and the media have a job to do, I think, in ensuring that citizens know that democracy is worth it and that you can make a change in your government by joining a political party, first of all, by changing the political party from within. Or even if you just want to just vote every 4 years or whatever, when an election comes around, just do that. But it does make a difference because you can kick the bums out if you feel like it's bad.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, and if you don't have those relationships, then you don't have a voice or an access. And, so at least it leads me to my next question. So, we look at business leaders and especially small business leaders, like many of our office owners are in every market in Canada. Any advice for how business leaders can engage and the first steps to work with local government? And I think that speaks to municipal, to provincial and to federal. That's often the frustration, but is it worth to get started and how should they do it?
That's a fantastic question because I think, back to your first question, your earlier question, people are pretty suspicious of politicians. They think that they are useless and that there's no point. Yeah. That is not true. And the lower the level of government you're dealing with, the more useful, the more impactful contact with them is. And, people talk about the backroom boys in politics, and yep, some of that happens for sure. But really, the people who are in the backroom of politics are the people that make the calls. They're the people that are around. They're the people that go to meetings. Why don't you become one of those people? Become known to government. Take a little bit of time. Now, it's hard, I know, for small business people to find the time to do that when you're just barely keeping your head above water. But, if you're talking about a municipal council, I can't imagine that there are many municipal councilors who, you're a municipal councilor in Coquitlam, you get a call from the guy that owns the Speedy Auto Glass franchise and says, hey, listen, I'd like to invite you over to have a coffee and meet some of my staff. And I'm sure they would do that. 90% of the time. And then you get a chance to talk to them, familiarize yourself with them, but also familiarize them with the challenges and the opportunities your business has. And they meet your staff and figure out, they start to understand how important they are. Like, that personal contact is easy to make, and it's amazing how few people actually do it.
Mhm. It's such a valid point in every community in Canada. It just can start, as you just said, municipally at your city council. I mean, it's the relationships that I built with the councillors and mayors in the communities in my neighborhood in British Columbia have been so instrumental to our success. Because when you do have a real concern or advice, or you'd like to, make a comment or something, you have somebody who knows you will make time for you to maybe, send it up the flagpole. I mean, it has been incredibly important. So I think that's the answer to the question, guys. Start just locally in your own local, community. Get to know your counselors. Show up. Support. I think that's a really, really easy thing to do.
And Gary, can I just say something about provincial politics?
Please, yeah.
People should know, small business people in particular, who don't have big voices out there speaking for them. You got to remember how important caucus members are. The premier meets with his or her caucus every single week when the House is sitting, and at least once a month when the House isn't sitting. And so, for example, when we were doing work on changing the way liquor stores were operating, we had, every liquor store owner, I swear to God, in the province went to meet with their MLA. Right. And my caucus was in tumult about this. They were freaking out. And that made a difference in terms of the way we approached. We heard them. We heard them through their MLAs. And so you should never think twice about phoning your MLA and going for a meeting with them. You're not there to try and beat them up or criticize them. You're there to say, hey, listen, this is the government policy, and I just want you to know it's really going to hurt my business. And here's why it's going to hurt my business. I'd love to have you come meet my staff and everybody. I think, we play an important role in this community. And I hope I can ask of you is that you will bring your concerns to the minister and to the premier, or to the caucus, to speak on my behalf, because I'm really worried that this policy change is going to make it impossible for me to continue in this community. So it doesn't have to be confrontational. In fact, it shouldn't be. You're trying to make a friend, but never, ever step back from phoning somebody in government if you have a problem. And I don't mean bureaucrats. I mean politicians. Mm-hmm.
As they say, and there's never been a truer, statement, but it still applies today, right? The squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Yep. And, like anything we talk about, right? Just, trying to fit in or stand on the sidelines, right? Never advances forward progress. So great. So Christy, what do you think today are maybe some of the greatest challenges facing us as business leaders? I mean, arguably at one time you ran one of the, the biggest businesses in the province in government. So today, and where we're at today, and you've been removed for several years, but what are the challenges that you recognize today that business leaders are going to be facing over the next year or two?
I think business leaders' biggest problem is a lot of it's going to be COVID related. And I don't mean trying to get back on your feet after COVID, and sadly some won't. We know that. Because, rebuilding after that, I think the problems that businesses are going to face are going to have their root in government, because we are blowing up a massive, massive debt across the country. I think we'll probably see our credit rating downgraded. I mean, British Columbia, we always maintained a AAA credit rating when I was the premier, and those, we're going to start to see all that downgraded. We're a small economy without the ability to be able to support the debt that we have. So we're not in the position that the United States is in. And we are going to, I think, start to see governments do two things. They're going to cut back massively on services, which may not affect businesses so much. Although, if you're hoping that your mom or dad can get the healthcare that they need, that might be a very real problem on a personal level. But it's also going to mean governments are starting to look for revenue. And that's going to come from the business community. So I think that, and individuals, obviously, I just think you're going to see more money flowing into government and less money flowing directly into the economy, which is a terrible thing. The more money that the private sector generates that goes directly into people's pockets to be spent again and used to invest again is far better than government spending it for people. So I am very deeply concerned about the debt and the impact that that's going to have on our long-term economy. And I do think that with the United States kind of being back and doing better, I think that's going to be a real competitive problem for us too.
So let me tell you, let me ask you, have we seen the last of Christy Clark? Because that sounds pretty compelling.
Yeah, well, for now you have. I don't know, Gary.
For now,
know.
yeah. I don't know, Christy. I think it's been in your blood for I mean, from watching your dad as a little girl, I would question that's the case.
I've had my fill of it for now. That is for sure. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like, I am loving my private life. It's great. I can see my friends and I can help people in a different way. So I don't know. I've really enjoyed kind of the anonymity, I guess, of private life.
Yeah, here's a question, Gary. Back to bullying. Can you talk about being called a bully in business? I've heard you call a bully that before, but I see you being compassionate, protecting your brokers and companies. There is a big, huge difference. You speak for your people and to protect them. So I'll take a quick shot at that because it's based on me. As I said to you before, anytime you're leading or you're doing something, cutting edge, or you're leading an industry, or you're outpacing somebody else in growth. Unfortunately, rather than people just bearing down and building a better business, they try to rise themselves up by rumor and innuendo and calling, you a bully. And it's not staying special for me. It's for any leaders in the industry. And as I said to Christy earlier, anyone who knows me, whether it's brokers or lenders or insurers or franchise owners or offices or any of the constituents that are in our orbit, they know better. So, I just think that when you are at the top, or when you are, let's use, Charlie Sheen's word, winning, when you seem to be doing well in any industry, people are naturally taking shots at you. And you just have to become very thick-skinned and just understand that it doesn't matter, because those who know you know best.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you want to comment to that, Christy? Because I mean,
No.
You've been at the very top of industry, and and I know, being in your home province, that you were bullied, online, via the media. I like this. I remember this, Christy. If this man kicked a dog, he'd still win the election. Well, let's talk about that. I love that.
I know, I do too. Gosh, I've always wanted to get a copy of that.
We'll get it. We'll get it to you.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. Yeah, it's one of those things. And when I think, this is I think important for business, and I'm sure this is something that you've done too, Gary. I remember in 2013, in about, the election was going to be in May, so it was probably like January, February. We were just in the ditch. And no, it was earlier than that. It was probably like August the year before, 2012. We were in the ditch, and we were like 20 points behind, and there was just no coming back. It was terrible. The media were obsessed with just every contact I had with them. It was all, why are you going to lose? Why are you such a loser? Why are you, so terrible at this? And I remember one day just saying, you know what? I just decided that the only way to win was to take it all on my own shoulders, and that I was going to do this myself. And that if I won or I lost, I would do it with no regrets, because I was going to go all in, leave nothing in the field. But that the only way to get there through all the noise was to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. I mean, it's that Winston Churchill quote, which I always misquote, but it's something about, when you're walking through hell and you're trying to get out, the only thing you can do is keep walking. That's what I felt like. And that's what I did.
Well, he must have kicked a lot of dogs, because you kicked a lot of ass, Christy, right? When that happened. So, I mean, congratulations. Listen, we're going to wind down in the next 4 or 5 minutes. Looking back now, Christy, Hamish's, how old is your son now? He's
19.
He's 19 years old. Wow, he's 19 already. Looking back now and looking back at your storied career and your history in politics, if you were given your 25-year self now, 25-year-old self, some tips or some wisdom, what would it be?
I would say, if I was going to look back, oh boy, that's a really tough question, because I'm not quite in the looking back stage yet.
Right.
I would say, Christy, you don't have to do everything yourself. Don't be afraid of asking people to help you. Be clear about the help that you want and the help that you need from other people. I would say, always remember to be kind, even when it's really hard and you feel like you're dying, but you don't need to kill everybody else around you. And I think, kindness is the most important part of this. And also remember that this is only one stage of your life. There's a lot more that's going to happen. And
Right.
you're not going to die if you fail. So I think those would be kind of some of the things I would say, to be kinder to myself maybe, and to be kinder to other people, because when you get caught up in the hurly-burly of doing something that's really, really, really hard, I think it's easy to just sort of run over other people and forget that they're all doing their best too sometimes.
Yeah. Very interesting. Well, you said something there that was very compelling to me. We see so many people, and we see it in bullying, especially, right? Like, reminding our children that, hey, in 10 or 12 or 4 or 6 or 20 years from now, none of this is going to matter. It's such a small piece in your life. So you have to look far enough out to know that this too shall pass and you will get through it. And I think that's a really good lesson in business. Let me ask you one question, Christy, because often, and me as a male and someone that has been really, really fortunate through our people in our industry, I still sometimes suffer with the imposter syndrome. It's like, holy shit, can you believe I'm the CEO? Like, really? Like, who have I fooled? Right? Did you deal with the imposter syndrome all the way through, or did it get better, or do you still fight the imposter syndrome? Because I know a lot of people who are running their businesses, mortgage companies, just go, wow, like I should know more. I didn't go to university. I don't have the education. I shouldn't be here. Just give me your thoughts on that, would you?
Yes, I suffered from it all my life until when I think we were in opposition, and the Attorney General critic, who was a brilliant man, really brilliant, great education, fantastic career. I thought probably the smartest member of our caucus.
Who was
sitting
that?
around having a glass of wine one day, and he says, sometimes I just feel like such a fraud. And I went, what? You feel like a fraud? And then I realized, well, if he feels like a fraud, then everybody feels like a fraud. And once I realized everybody felt like a fraud, I was like, well, maybe either we're all frauds, and I'm okay being a fraud, or we're not all frauds and I'm not one either.
Crazy. Unbelievable. I want to, while we're still live here, I want to thank our sponsor, First National, just some of the greatest partners in the Canadian finance space. Been with us since day one. Stephen, the whole team, Scotty, dear pal of mine. Thanks for all the work you do in the broker channel. We're huge fans. And I want to thank you, Christy. And boy, I could sit here and hopefully we get a chance when we're through this COVID to sit down and have a glass of wine or two, because it's funny. I've known you for years and we've been in the same space and had lots of mutual friends, but we haven't spent any real time sitting down. And I can tell you, wow, you are just an incredible individual. You are the epitome of leadership. Forget about female leadership. I mean, that's a given. You are the epitome of leadership. You're kind, you're generous, you're caring. And we just appreciate you sharing. So guys, anyone on this podcast today, again, we're going to send out 50 copies, tag myself, tag Christy, make a comment online. I'm sure if we want Christy back sometime to ask more questions, hopefully she would be happy to do so. But Christy, on behalf of the Level Up podcast series, on behalf of Dave Teixeira, who helped put this together, and my team, I just can't tell you how grateful we are. It's incredible. It's just been what a great hour.
It's been great to share this, and appreciate you sharing your listeners' time with me, Gary. And remember, in this book, the most important message is, for me anyway, it is not as important to be happy. It is important to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
That's, to me, we search for happiness. We think about what's going to make us happy. Should I go for a spa weekend? I actually think that fulfillment is the more important part of it.
And is that in your opinion, while we got you this, I'm going to squeeze every second out. Is that goes back to the messaging around eulogy, family, around relationships, around love, not about stuff.
Not about stuff. It's about, and I think that's why kindness, it matters, because we feel so good about ourselves. We feel so fulfilled when we're kind to other people. And that's because we are giving. It's not about we're giving, we're making someone else happy, but making someone else happy is usually the best way to make yourself happy.
What a great way to end. Ms. Clark, thank you so much for everything you do. I know you're going to stay online for a minute. We're going to do just a quick sort of 60-second afterwards to all of my friends, our team, anyone on social media. We really appreciate your time. The hour you spent with us today was incredible. Thank you very much. Tune in for our Next Level Up series. Can't wait. Tom Kaiser. We're going to have that March 11th at 2 o'clock. Dave, to my team, everyone else, thank you very much. Have a great day, guys. See you soon.